nail the robots to the floor, you dingbats. I would never dream of trying to suss out the FNAF timeline. There have been too many, infinitely more qualified than I, who have gone to that well in an attempt to slake their thirst, only to find their mouths filled with mud and their thirst unquenched when Scott Cawthon drops a new game and stirs up all the lore. So I will be going to a different well, a little smaller, located directly next to the main well, and I'll be drinking out of that. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Summer, and today we're going to be talking about the Silver Eyes trilogy. Here's my thought process behind this. The lore of Five Nights at Freddy's? Compelling, intriguing, tangled, and difficult to understand. Now, everything I've learned about FNAF, I've learned from game theory videos. I'm a little late to the party since I didn't hear about Five Nights at Freddy's until 2016, 2017. And I do mean that date literally because it was New Year's Eve 2016. I found a big playlist of Five Nights at Freddy's video to have in the background while I deep cleaned my bedroom since all of my roommates were out of town, and it seemed like a fun and exciting way to ring in 2017. So while I have not been here since the very beginning, I have been at this party for the past 5.5 years. I know where the ice is, I know where the extra chips are stored, and I'm already best friends with the dog. This is especially true since in 2019, I found out my stepsister really likes Five Nights at Freddy's as well, and we were discussing the games, talking a little bit about the lore, and it turns out she'd been mostly watching Markiplier playthroughs, so she didn't have as many of the details as I did. So we decided to watch all of the theory videos together as like a sisterly bonding experience, and for every theory video that's come out since then, pretty much I've watched it once on my own and then watched it with her the next time I saw her. All this to say, I understand that the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's is intricate and often subject to change depending on what each new installment adds to the franchise. And this brings me to the books. I've noticed that in the recent slew of theory videos, more and more Five Nights at Freddy's books have been brought in and held up as evidence, despite frequent protestations that what happens in the books and what happens in the games are not the same canon. And these books intrigued me. Because I'm not good at video games. My hand-eye coordination is abysmal, and I could not get past night 3 of the very first game. Oh no. Does this just mean I died? Okay. This isn't fun for me. This is just stressful, and I don't like it. And it's not the best time I've ever had in my life. I've had better days. It was Golden Freddy. I don't know what that means. Is that lore? This means that I've been unable to uncover any of the lore for myself. Is that lore? And I've been experiencing the story of Five Nights at Freddy's secondhand. But I am good at reading. I love a book, love a story, and I figured the books would be an excellent entry into experiencing the lore of this series firsthand, especially since the trilogy itself is complete, which means the lore of the trilogy is somewhat set and self-contained. Not that I would ever dream saying anything in this game is set or decided. Right off the bat, we can all agree that the main character and plot of the games is different than the main character and plot of the Silver Eyes trilogy. Now, I don't think this means that we write the books off and say that what happens in one is inconsequential to what happens in the other, because the most accurate way of looking at this is that they're telling the same story, just from a different angle. The imitation Chuck E. Cheese pizzeria at the core of this story remains the same. It is a steadfast, it is a constant. And in the games, the main character is, of course, you, the player. Now, there are theories as to who the player represents, but the story itself is unfolding from your point of view as you sit in the dubious shelter of the stupidest security room known to man. All I gotta say is those safety doors aren't very safe. And if it was my first day on the job, and I sit down and I'm like, okay, time to batten down the hatches. Where are the hatches? Where are the locks? Where are the deadbolts? Where is my medieval, moat crank that will protect me from the quirky animatronics. If those aren't there, I'm out the door. When did I get there? Did I start my shift at 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock? 5 minutes into my shift, I'm calling the phone guy back and I'm like, hey pal, find another person. This ain't the gig for me. And I'm out the door. I'm gone. I'm strutting. Before the animatronics can get any weird or quirky, I'm not there anymore. So you learn about the missing children, William Afton, the haunted animatronics, as someone uncovering the mystery for themselves. Whereas in the books, or at least in the Silver Eyes trilogy, it's the same story, William Afton, the haunted animatronics, but it's being told by one of the missing children. Reading the trilogy truly did help me understand aspects of the lore that I knew but didn't quite grasp. And so while I will say the books raised several questions of their own, overall, they are an important part of the story that needs to be included when trying to understand the deeper lore of these games. So what I'm going to do in this video is break down the books so that anybody who hasn't read them yet can benefit from some of the details and intricacies and how they support and reveal tenets of the main game lore. I will say though, for anybody who has even a passing interest in reading these books, you definitely should. I went into this thinking I was going to make some sort of like, I read this so you don't have to, and that they were going to just be poorly written, hard to read, and only good for laughing at and trying to mine for, like, I don't know how many toes Freddy Fazbear has. They don't mention. I'll just say right now that I don't think there's, not to my knowledge, is there a single toe mentioned. No free feet pigs. Anyway, what I ended up finding was that these books were a lot of fun. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the story, they were atmospheric and spooky, and they were just a good time. So definitely give them a chance if you feel like reading them because they were fun, and sometimes that's all you need. Also, ignore the copious amounts of outfit changes I'm going to go through in this video. If there is one thing about me, I'm going to flub a line. I'm going to need to start over, and then I'm going to want to get a take for safety. And what I'm going to end up with is like 8 hours of footage that I have to edit through. And I'm not going to stay up all night editing again. I'm going to be smart about this. I'm smart. I know how to do stuff. So what I'm doing instead is I am recording it in increments. Increment 1, fresh from church, and I will look like what I look like, and we're not going to mention it from here on out. We're just going to act like you and I are sitting in the same room talking to each other, having a single conversation, and a wizard off screen is changing my apparel. Okay? Quick disclaimer before we start, I read these books in July and then waited until mid-October to write the script, so if there's any small discrepancies between my script and the books, my apologies. Also, I have the script pulled up and I'm full on just like reading it because I need to film this and have it not take a million years. So if you see me here, let me take a screenshot of what this looks like right now. There we go. My apologies. First book in the Silver Eyes trilogy is The Silver Eyes. In it, we follow Charlotte Emily, or Charlie, a 17-year-old returning to her hometown of Hurricane, Utah for the first time in 10 years, a place she hasn't seen since she was 7 years old. Not since Michael went missing. Not since her dad died. Now you may be thinking, Michael! Don't leave me here! Michael! Michael! But this is actually a different Michael. Believe me, I had a little whiteboard in my brain covered in red string. I was writing down those names, but this is a different Michael. In FNAF 5, Sister Location, we learn about Michael Afton, son of William Afton, a man whose name means nothing to you if you've never played the games or watched the games be played or watched any theory videos or read these books, but William Afton is important and we'll circle back to him. Anyway, Michael Afton, Michael, is an adult man whose warm, gooey insides get scooped out and a robot wiggles its way into the holes where his bones once were until his body becomes too rotten to be a viable host and he's left jiggly and purple to seek revenge on the ghost of his dead father. Or something along those lines. Like I said, we're focusing on the books right now. We're focusing on the books and that happened in the games. And before you get excited, keep in mind, I know I just said purple and I just said guy, but this is not the purple guy. This is a different purple guy. There are two. The book Michael is a sweet 7-year-old kid who went missing in July of 1985. Note, I said 85, not 83, and not 87, and I'll spare you the suspense. Nary a bite is mentioned in these books, so we're not going to get any answers there. Michael went missing around the same time as 4 other children in a series of cases that have haunted the town of Hurricane ever since. Charlie and several other of Michael's friends have been invited back to Hurricane for a special ceremony being held by Michael's parents. They've created a scholarship for other students who love art the way their son once did, and they want his friends to be there when it's first awarded. The first thing human Charlie does when she arrives in town, and she's human, by the way, that's definitely not something that's called into question over the course of these books. The first thing she does when she arrives in Hurricane is visit her childhood home. Now, she hasn't been here since the day her dad died. Her aunt had taken her in, grabbed some clothes, promising that they would come back for the rest of her things, but they never did. And despite her aunt's best efforts as she carried her inside the house and tried to make her look away, little Charlie did see the bloodstains on the living room rug. Charlie does a nostalgia lap around the house, hitting up her old childhood bedroom so that she can see the special toys she'd been forced to leave behind. Now, before we progress further in the plot, I'm going to do a brief rundown of these toys because let me tell you, my little conspiracy brain was going absolutely bonkers over the items that Charlie was finding. The FNAF lore alarms in my mind were ring-a-ling on their little fire bell. But anyway, if you are a fresh little FNAF baby, the significance of some of these items may be lost on you. But if you're not a fresh little FNAF baby, please enjoy connecting these dots. 1, Charlie has a giddy feeling as she walks up the stairs that she might find her younger self sitting amongst her childhood toys. 2, her dad made her a teeny animatronic purple rabbit named Theodore. A purple rabbit named Theodore. Now, my first thought upon reading this description was, Bonnie parallel? My second thought upon writing this script was, that's a purple rabbit. Heavy-handed foreshadowing aside, Theodore is just a little rabbit toy. He is, just a little rabbit who can talk, but I want you to lock him away in your brain because he will come back in ways that are confounding and maybe don't hold up if you give him too much thought. But you know what? Just lock him aside. Put him away. We are going to come back to Theodore, the little purple rabbit. The last toy in the room is a little robot doll named Ella. Ella carries a little tea tray and she can walk on her own. Now, she and Charlie used to have matching outfits when Charlie was the same size. Ella also lives in a little closet in Charlie's bedroom. There are 3 closets, actually. They ascend in size, and Ella, who was little, lived in the little closet when Charlie was not as little as Ella anymore. The 3rd closet, the big girl closet, Charlie was never allowed to look into. She was not allowed to look into the big girl closet. The big girl closet. When she does so now, figuring she's finally old enough to look in the big girl closet, it's empty. That's bonkers. I wonder why. Ella was also built by Charlie's father. The last thing Charlie checks out is the garage, and there's nothing of note in there, which is good. She'd been worried she'd have to see the one project of her father's that she'd been afraid of, which was this endoskeleton, robot bones, that always sort of twitched or moved, and it had shining silver eyes, and when Charlie saw it, she knew instinctively that the robot was in pain. Maybe it's a remnant. There is also an animatronic unicorn named Stanley, but other than the fact that one of the recent Fazbear Frights books has a short story with a security guard named Stanley who dies when a bunch of tiny robot ballerinas crawl inside of his body, he's not really important, so I just thought you want to know. Now, the 4 points I just made laid some serious groundwork for this book and the next 2 books to follow. What we learned from this very significant trip to Charlie's house is that her father built robotic toys and animals. He had a painfully twitching, ongoing side project that she was too afraid to ask about, And he was the owner of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a pizza parlor and arcade that had singing and dancing animatronics. Charlie finally drives into town and meets up with several of her friends at a diner. They're all around 17, and many of them haven't seen each other in the past 10 years. There's John, her childhood best friend, Jessica, the sort of nice, pretty popular girl, and Carlton, the joker of the group and the son of the chief of police. These are the four main characters. While they're getting some food, they're, talking, reminiscing, shooting the breeze, and they decide, what would be fun? What would be a fun nighttime activity for us to go do? Let's go back to Freddy's for the first time in 10 years since our friend went missing there. Isn't that a fun idea, guys? Yeah, it is a fun idea, so they go do that. Sure, they haven't been there since children started going missing, and yes, the place has been closed down for 10 years, and of course, you could say it is inexorably linked with tragedy, but they used to have fun there, so why not? When the kids drive over to where Freddy's was, they discover that it's been torn down, and in its place is now the giant husk of a shopping mall abandoned mid-construction. Shades of security breach, perhaps? An omen? A portent of things to come? All I can say is that this book was released in 2015, and games take a long time to develop. Maybe Scott was plotting more than just this book. Anyway, hold on. Anyway, because this is a horror story and we have a group of teenagers on our hands, they all clamber into the abandoned mall to explore. They're having a silly, goofy time until they realize there's this really big blank space on one of the walls. Like, it's big enough to have a storefront, but nothing's there. And the stores on either side don't expand into that space. And when they give it a little bit of thought, they realize, you know what? This is located exactly where the old Freddy's used to stand. Just then, a security guard comes around the corner, and they all decide to hide in one of the abandoned storefronts. They go behind some scaffolding and some tarps until they find a hidden door. They go through it because they're teenagers in a horror story and the security guard's almost upon them, and what they find behind the door is Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, perfectly preserved. The whole building, roof, exterior walls, everything, stuffed inside the mall like a little pepperoni in a calzone. Ooh. Who would do this? What contractor would make this decision? In what world is hiding a building more effective in hushing up past crimes than just tearing the building down? We're not going to ask these questions because this is a story about haunted animatronics and we're going to let it pass. Also, it's a cool concept. It's a bangin' idea. A perfectly preserved haunted children's arcade inside the bones of an unfinished mall? That's a visual I can appreciate. The atmosphere and overall vibes of this first book are really well done. They have that perfect classic 80s 90s slasher feel to it. The feeling you get when you're watching you sit down and you're watching Halloween, and it's that nostalgia and that je ne sais quoi, what is the mise en scène. They go in, of course, take a look around, and realize that whoever built this mall really did just wall the pizzeria up as is. All the furniture is still there, the arcade games, there's children's art still on the walls, and the animatronics are still on the stage. Later that night, after everybody's gone home or back to their hotels, Jessica and Charlie have a conversation about how the animatronics made them feel when they were younger. I will read it to you now. It sounds stupid when I say it, but when I looked at him, he looked so alive, and yet I just knew that he wasn't. It made my skin crawl. That's the worst thing, isn't it? Charlie said. Things that act alive but aren't. What? Jessica said. I mean things that look alive but aren't, Charlie said quickly. We should get some sleep. Things that look alive but aren't, Charlie said. Interesting. I'm really trying to decide if it's worth it to go stop the dishwasher. The next morning, they're joined by Lamar and Marla, the last of Michael's friends, and Marla's little brother, Jason. Marla and Jason's parents moved them out of town shortly after Michael went missing for the following reason. My parents left because of Michael, Marla said. They all turned to her. Afterward, my mom couldn't sleep. She said spirits were stirring in the town, unquiet. My dad told her she was being ridiculous, but we still left as fast as we could. Marla looked around at her friends. What? She said defensively. I don't believe in ghosts. I do, Charlie said. She felt like she was talking from a great distance. She was almost surprised they could hear her. I mean, not ghosts, but memories. I think they linger, whether there's someone there or not. Memories lingering, you say, Charlie? They all attend the ceremony. Charlie wore black and white, by the way. Black and white? That's all I'm going to say about that. Moving on, we're focusing on these books. At this point, I think I should pause and introduce the animatronics for the uninitiated. First, on our main stage, we have the man himself, Freddy Fazbear. He's a brown bear, he wears a charming little top hat, and he is the main singer and face of the brand. Next, we have Bonnie. He's a blue rabbit who plays bass guitar. He is one of our main players, but of the core four, he is the most inconsistent across FNAF media. Sometimes he's a hand puppet. Other times, an animatronic alligator beats him up and takes his spot. What can I say? He contains multitudes. Third, we have Chica, the lone lady of the group. She is a yellow chicken, she carries a little cupcake around, and she wears a bib that says, "Let's eat," which is fitting because she really enjoys eating garbage. Finally, we have Foxy. He's a red fox, he's a pirate, he has a big ol' giant hook for a hand, and he lives in a tent that has an out of order sign on a smaller stage in one of the rooms for special parties.
Mitzi, hi.
Back to the story. After the ceremony, all 7 of them, not including Jason, he's too young to remember. After the ceremony, all 7 of them, not including Jason, he's too young to remember, reminisce about their last day at Freddy's. It was a strange day, the day that Michael went, "No! Mitzi, you cannot walk on my keyboard." Mitzi, you gotta stop walking on my keyboard. Okay. It was the day Michael went missing, a strange day when all the animatronics went crazy, rocking on their bolted feet and not following their programmed moves. John thought he saw a yellow bear, but that doesn't make sense. Chica's the only yellow one, and she's a chicken. All this talk makes the kids want to go back to Freddy's because they are a group of teens in a horror story, and 3 members of their group haven't seen it yet. So they sneak back into the mall, barely managing to evade the notice of the security guard for a second time. Although this time it almost seems as if he was deliberately ignoring them. This time they figure out how to turn the power on. They get the lights going, they see the animatronics in their full glory, and not only that, they find 2 security rooms. One behind the main stage that has controls to make the animatronics move, and the other down the hallway near Foxy's tent. And sprinkled throughout the scene are some great little nods to the game. Lamar studied the monitor. Bonnie's head was up and turned to the side, his eyes appearing to watch the camera. Things are a little quirkier.
The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night.
This time around. There's the sound of a mysterious music box that's playing off and on in the distance, but not everyone can hear it. Jason, the only true child among them, picks up one of the pieces of children's art from the walls and watches as the image changes in his hand. And there's this weird voice trying to communicate something to them through the static on the PA system.
I think whoever's singing should keep that song to themselves. Keep that song in your heart and stop singing it to me.
Needless to say, everyone's a little creeped out and they all decide to spend the night in the same hotel room. Charlie is the first one to wake up the next morning, way earlier than everyone else, and she's very unsettled, so she decides to go take a walk. John follows her. Now, one thing you gotta know about John is that Baby Boy's got a big crush on our main girl, Charlie. And of all the friends, Charlie was closest to John when they were little. So when John asks, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Charlie spills. She's been having these memories of a place like Freddy's, but different, more rustic, wooden floors, checkered tablecloths, and the animatronics are different. There's only 2 of them, a yellow bear and a yellow rabbit, and they can dance. And of course, sometimes she remembers it as the programmed patterned, shifting of an animatronic robot, but other times they can truly dance, bend, move, fluid motions like a person. Charlie tells John she thinks there's another version of Freddy's somewhere else. Using details and landmarks that Charlie dimly remembers, she and John find a possible spot in the next town over near a set of train tracks. They take the drive and find it, the original restaurant, Fredbear's Family Diner. It's crazy for Charlie to be back in this building. She had completely forgotten it. Memories she didn't even know she had start resurfacing, including a memory so terrible and so big that it rocks the foundations of her world. She had a brother, Sammy. She was a twin and she had a brother. When they were small, they used to hide in the closets at Fredbear's, nestled up amongst the old costumes and playing with toys, until one day, the closet door opened and the yellow rabbit was there. He'd looked down at them for a long time as if making an important decision, as if he was weighing his options. And then he took Sammy. Understandably, this big, uncomfy wave of forgotten horrors is very distressing for Charlie. Why did her father never tell her she had a brother? Why did her aunt, who she grew up with, never mention she was a twin? All throughout the book, there's been this underlying suspicion that Charlie's father may have been the one responsible for the missing children. He'd owned Freddy Fazbear's after all, which he'd shut down shortly after Michael went missing, and his self-inflicted death followed soon after. Maybe he hadn't been able to handle the guilt of what he'd done. Charlie knows this isn't true, that it can't be true, that the man she loved and idolized could not be responsible for these crimes. But this revelation about Sammy throws everything she thought she knew to be true into a new light. She's beginning to realize that she does not know her father as well as she thought she did. Before they leave, Charlie picks up a piece of metal she finds on the ground, and another memory surfaces. The piece of metal is a spring lock. Now, these will become important later on down the line, but since I've mentioned them, let me go ahead and run over what they are. Spring locks, for anyone who might be wondering, are a component of the early version of the Freddy's animatronics. These were designed to be both fully functioning animatronics and a mascot suit that could be worn. The spring locks held back all of the machinery so that the wearer could put the mascot suit on and walk around to interact with the kids. These locks were highly sensitive if not set correctly, and in the game specifically, they're sensitive to water. And once sprung, these locks would release all of the robotics and metal to fill that space that a human being could occupy without any real fail-safes to prevent a violent and terrible death should a person still be inside the suit when that happens. Charlie and John drive back to Hurricane and meet up with the others in the diner. And everybody's like, we're going back to Freddy's because we're teenagers in a horror story and we enjoy tempting fate. Now, there's a construct in storytelling called the rule of threes. It has to do with pattern recognition. The first time something is mentioned in a story, a concept, character, location, situation, it could be significant or it could be a one-off. The audience has no way of knowing yet. The second time that concept, character, location, situation is mentioned, it cements that significance. The third time the noun is mentioned is the payoff. Our intrepid troop of inquisitive teens and Jason are heading back to Freddy's for the third time. From the beginning, this trip is wrong. First, they get caught by the security guard. But instead of turning them in or calling the cops, he agrees to join them. Dave is weird. Something about him is off. First, he has to look at his name tag to remember that his name is Dave. I'm obsessed with turning this way, and I keep revealing my horrible secret. I didn't really do my hair well this morning. So we maintain the messy bun like this. That's not my business. That could be my business. Apparently I know about this. This I'm unaware of, and we're not discussing. First, he has to look at his name tag. There we go. That's a solution. Okay. Dave is weird. Something about him is off. First, he has to look at his name tag before telling them that his name is Dave. He's also unhealthily skinny, like his skin hangs off him as if he used to be a healthier weight, but he lost it all suddenly. He's also got these two crescent-shaped scars on his neck, as if something, pierced his neck. As if some sort of trap was sprung and pierced his neck. He's got this eagerness to see the place, this sense of familiarity as he walks in, as if he's been there before and is finally coming back. Also, he's generically creepy, making eyes at 17-year-old Jessica, who's like the pretty girl of the group, when he himself is a musty old weirdo. Summer, that's not very nice. Yeah, well, Dave's not nice, and I'm getting to it. So the group starts doing what they've done the last two visits. They split up, they look around, they get the power going, they make the animatronics move with the controls. Dave's still lurking around, and they offer him the controls to the animatronics because he seems interested. He's really good. As if he's done it before, and he immediately starts putting them through this complex, choreographed dance as if it's second nature to him. Jason, in the meantime, has gone wandering off on his own, and he winds up near the children's drawings again. Just like before, he notices something a little strange with the drawings. Something in one of them moves, and suddenly he's watching as this yellow rabbit sketched in crayon chases these little crayon kids from page to page. Yes, I say crayon, not crayon. My mother's very disappointed in me. It's then things start to go completely off the rails. Dave leaves the security booth and starts moving towards the animatronics, and they don't like it. They start freaking out, jerking, twitching. Bonnie rips up one foot, then another, and then suddenly all of the animatronics are free. They're loose and walking. After some quick thinking and lucky saves, everyone manages to get away from the animatronics. Everyone but Carlton. Carlton and Dave. They need to find Carlton, but they also need to escape, and they're beginning to realize that this may be a situation where they can't help Carlton on their own. Jason's repeating over and over again that he saw Bonnie, the rabbit, take Carlton, but nobody's listening to him, and so they finally decide that they need to get help, and they leave the pizzeria. The 6 of them run out of the mall and start driving. They're looking for a cop, any cop. They manage to find one on duty nearby, and they beg him to come back with them, telling him that something bad happened at the old Freddy Fazbear's in the mall, and that Carlton, the son of the chief of police, is missing. The cop thinks this is all very silly and is trying to inform the youth of America that trespassing is against the law, but he does agree to go check it out. They lead him to the hidden pizzeria. They lead him to the hidden pizzeria only to find that the door of Freddy's has been chained shut with an old, rusty chain that looks as if it hasn't been disturbed in years. This pretty much solidifies the story the kids are telling as a bunch of malarkey in the cop's eyes, but since the kids are really upset, and they're upset about the police chief's son, he decides to take them to Chief Burke's place. The chief invites them to stay the night, and reassures them that everything is fine, in the manner of a man who does not believe that animatronics can rip themselves from their moorings and start chasing people around the room. That Carlton is just a goofy guy, a jokester, one of God's silliest geese, and this is probably just a classic Carlton mess around, and he'll be back in the morning. Charlie has a dream that night, a confusing dream where she goes from little girl to teenager as she walks down the steps of her childhood home. Her father is there. She comes face to face with Foxy and his burning silver eyes. And side note, there is this weird emphasis on Foxy that I do not 100% understand. Like, you would think it would be Freddy who'd be the animatronic walking through people's dreams since he is the face of this company. But no, in the book, it's Foxy. It's Foxy who's chasing Charlie in the cold open. It's Foxy that she's dreaming about. Is it because he has a hook? He has a hook for a hand and is the only animatronic with a built-in weapon? I don't know. Also, I feel like I'm saying animatronic in a bunch of different and weird ways. Charlie wakes up and she needs to find more information about Sammy, about her father. John joins her and the two hurry back to her childhood home. And in her father's room, she finds an assortment of books, files, a photo album. And in the album, she finds a picture of her father, her mother, and 2 little babies. Sammy was real. A memory had surfaced with the dream, and what they had found in her father's papers confirmed it. That her father had died by his own hands was something Charlie knew. It had been a violent end, and she'd seen the blood-stained carpet despite her aunt's best efforts. But what she hadn't known was the method. Her father had built an animatronic, rudimentary, no frills, that had a big knife and a single purpose. It's looking more and more like Charlie's dad may have been the culprit, so John and Charlie head to the local library to look at old newspapers with the microfiche. And I love a good microfiche scene. Solve that crime, kids! They find some mentions of Freddy's, such as the fact that Fredbear's shut down after Sammy went missing and that Charlie's parents divorced, but the most important piece of information they find is that her father was not the sole owner of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza or Fredbear's Family Diner. He'd had a partner, William Afton. This is fantastic news for Charlie, who can thankfully cross her father off the list of suspects because Dave is for sure William Afton, but they get interrupted by Marla. Jason is missing, and there's really only one place he could be. The kids gear up, this time bringing walkie-talkies, and they head back to Freddy's to find Jason and Carlton. Let's review, shall we? The first night in Hurricane, the core 4 go to Freddy's. That's night 1. The second night in Hurricane, all 7 of the kids return to Freddy's. That's night 2. The third night in Hurricane, all the kids and Dave go to Freddy's. That's night 3. The cop returns to check things out. It's not really at night, but we don't have another parallel, so that's night 4. And now, the kids are returning to save their friends and stop a madman. You want to know what that is? That's Five Nights at Freddy's, baby. The kids arrive at Freddy's, and the door is thankfully no longer chained. It is, however, welded shut, which means there is no way to get inside. Now, this series is mainly from Charlie's point of view, and one criticism I will make about the writing style is that it sometimes switches POVs without warning. This is especially the case in Book 3, but we'll get there. Allow me to now go over a few non-Charlie-centric moments that happened over the course of the end of this book. They aren't all necessarily in the correct order that they appeared, but you will get the information without me needing to switch points of view and set the scene every single time it changed, because it was rapid fire there at the end, and this is the best way to get this information to you. 1, while the teens were having a grand old time running away from the recently unbolted animatronics, Dave had snuck out and put on his grimy old yellow rabbit suit and kidnapped Carlton. Shocker. Carlton wakes up in one of the spring lock suits. Afton has placed him inside one and set the locks so they are at their most sensitive, not fully closed the way they should be when a person is inside. This means that the triggers are extremely sensitive and Carlton cannot move for fear of setting them off. Trapped and terrified, poor Carlton is villainously monologued at by Afton, who tells him, as I told you earlier, that a spring lock suit is a very painful way to die, and then he takes off his shirt and shows the horrible spring lock scars that go all the way down his body. I think what this means in terms of game lore parallels is that at some point between Michael's abduction and death, William Afton got trapped in his springlock suit much as he does in the minigames. This raises the questions, did he die? Is he a ghost? Are his ghostly powers what makes the door keep changing? Or did he manage to survive getting spring-locked and that's why he looks so sickly and he just used a blowtorch to weld the door shut? One or the other. Probably both. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that he always comes back. 2B. This brings me to one of the most unsettling aspects of this book. Every now and then, amidst the campy classic slasher horror tropes, it will touch on something truly distressing, and one of those is Afton's description. As I mentioned, he is a sickly man, but apparently during the time when he was actively kidnapping and murdering the 5 missing children, he was described in the books as a hefty man who had the ready geniality of a financially shrewd Santa Claus. Let me read that to you again. A hefty man who had the ready geniality of a financially shrewd Santa Claus. What a description. I hate it. Everybody in all the fan art, in the comics, in all the ways they try to portray him as this, even the little purple guy in the video games, they try to portray him as this like tall, svelte man of mystery. You know, you're thinking Billy and Stu from Scream, you're thinking Michael Myers, those tall shapes in silhouette that scare you and they're just like running through the night. But that's not the case here. This man was committing unspeakable crimes while simultaneously looking like Santa Claus. And the dichotomy between those two is just... It's very disgusting to me. And on top of that, he now looks like a deflated Santa Claus, as if all the joy and wonder of Christmas was sucked out of him. He was trapped in a robot death suit for who knows how long, and now all that is left are scars and the dark aura of his terrible crimes. As I mentioned earlier, the cop gets stabbed. Our pal from the other night decides to go check out Freddy's again by himself and without backup. Would you know it? The chain is gone, and so he goes waltzing in and gets stabbed. 4. Chief Burke is inspired to look at his own files after hearing what the kids have to say. While Henry's testimony had been incoherent enough to make him seem suspicious and William Afton seem to be the normal one, Afton had been one of the main suspects from the beginning. He was there when Sammy was killed, and he was around for the final string of murders. In his house, they'd found a musty rabbit suit. Not the Golden Bonnie Springlock suit, a different rabbit suit, but, still. And a bunch of journals filled with jealously admiring rants about Charlie's father, who was a man that was everything Afton wished he was, a true genius. but what the cops never found were bodies, so they had to release him. In his files, he finds Dave the security guard's application and his photo. When he holds the photo up to a photo of William Afton, he sees that they're the same man and wonders how he didn't realize it before. And I mean, in his defense, he's now a deflated Santa Claus made of pure evil. But 5. I'm not sure where else to make this point if I don't make it here, but I just wanted to say, no one remembers Charlie before Freddy's opened. So, like, her dad moved to town, and then when he opened Freddy's, he had a daughter. I don't know. Was it homeschool? Was it something else? Who can say? And 6, finally, while Carlton is trapped in the suit trying not to move, he sees Golden Freddy, and something about Golden Freddy is different. It reminds him of Michael, who was his best friend as a child. Okay, so now we go back to the 5th-ish night at Freddy. Charlie remembers that in her father's office there was a closet that had a skylight. So they bring a ladder in from the construction next door and make their way across the moldy, damp tiles on the roof. There is a skylight, but it's the kind that only opens partially when you pull it down, which means there's enough space for everybody to slide into the pizzeria, but no way for them to climb back out. They all slide in. The team splits up, using their walkie-talkies to communicate. Charlie and John find Carlton in the storage room, where he's been trapped in the suit and trying to hold perfectly still so as not to set off the spring lock traps. Thankfully, Charlie remembers how they work and locks them back long enough for Carlton to get out. It's an excruciatingly slow process, but it's done, and he's safe. Next, the group is going to try and find Jason, but that's when things start to go really wrong, because the animatronics start to hunt them down. Jessica and Lamar flee into the safety of the security booth behind the stage, and Chica starts pounding on that door. The only thing keeping her out is one of those locks that, like, the metal rod that goes into the ground, and then he, like, hope nothing moves that. That's the only thing keeping her out. So they're just staring at that metal rod while she's like... So that's them. Marla and John flee to the safety of the security booth near Foxy's tent. They have access to this bank of monitors, very similar to the game. They can see Jason, and they're trying to subtly guide him to themselves without alerting Foxy or having him run into any of the animatronics in the hall. Charlie, meanwhile, runs into the bathroom to hide in one of the stalls, balancing on the toilet seat. The door slams open and heavy footsteps plod into the bathroom. Through the crack, Charlie can see Bonnie walking through the bathroom with this excitement, like a child playing hide and seek. So Bonnie slams open the first stall, then slams open the second stall. Terrified and not willing to see if the flimsy lock on her own stall will hold back the force of a self-propelled animatronic that should be bolted to a stage and is thereby already showing a worrying amount of, strength and decision-making skills heretofore thought impossible. She starts sliding under the stalls, trying to get to the bathroom door without catching Bonnie's attention. However, she kicks something, makes a noise, and the next thing she sees is Bonnie's massive head as it peeks below the stall, staring right at her, and its hot, fetid breath washes over her from its open mouth. They all manage to get away from their respective dangers at some point, get into new ones. Charlie manages to get to the arcade, only to have Foxy hunt her through it and get his hook in her calf. But somehow they more or less end up safe in the same place. You read the books for the details. It's very action-packed and quite well done, but they can't find a way out of the pizzeria. They manage to corner Afton, whack him in the head, tie him up, and drag him in the storage room, where they're relatively safe. What follows is the very creepy denouement, in which we get the villain monologue and confession from William Afton, so let's get to it. First, he's unwilling to speak unless he's wearing the yellow Springlock Bonnie head. So he's sitting there, shirtless, staring at this Bonnie mask with this unrelenting intensity in his bulbous eyes, just like... And he will not answer their questions until they put the mask on him. When he speaks from the Bonnie mask, his voice isn't the weak, reedy whine of Dave the security guard. It's rich and musical and convincing. Afton was jealous of Charlie's dad. He wanted to create, to love the way that Charlie's dad did. In his sick and twisted mind, he seems to perceive what he did as an act of love, as if by killing these children and hiding their bodies in the animatronics, he'd preserved them forever. Now, this reasoning, this act of love, could potentially be tied to the loss of his own family. In the games, we know, or at least have conjectured based on strong supporting evidence, that William Afton, aka Purple Guy, had 3 children. His eldest son, Michael Afton, he's the jiggly boneless purple guy who's the only one who made it to adulthood. He also had a daughter, Elizabeth, who died tragically in a way that will be addressed in book 3, and potentially the crying child, the kid who got bit by Freddy in the bite of 83. When Carlton hears this, act of love malarkey, he objects, claiming that what Afton did was kill the children and trap them here, creating monsters. But Afton says, no, that is not what happened. They are at home with me. And then he calls that their happiest day. Charlie's like, okay, enough of this. How do we get out? And she pushes back the rabbit head so that Dave is looking at her. And then she says it's damp, as if the mask itself is sweating. So just to confirm what we covered in the words that I just said, Afton has trapped them all in what he considers his home, and he says that the children are having their happiest day. Now, one thing that had been established early on in this scene is that Afton's opinion of Henry's creation, so Henry was Charlie's father, Afton's opinion on what Henry was able to create is that he created beautiful things. The animatronics, the robotics he was able to do were beautiful. So when Charlie pushes at the rabbit's mask so that Dave will look at her, he gasps and he says, "Oh, you're something beautiful, aren't you? You're something beautiful, aren't you?" Finally, the last thing that is established, and this is important to keep in mind all the way through to the end of book 3, is that the ghosts of the children know that an adult hurt them. They are afraid of adults. They are scared that an adult will take away their happiest day, as one did before. Because they are in animatronic suits, anyone not in an animatronic suit, such as an adult, like Dave as he approached them. Also, I think there are some layers to the whole Dave approaching them thing and why there might be some fear there. But for consistency's sake, an unsuited Dave or a group of 17-year-olds on the cusp of adulthood, they are seen as the enemy. But Afton, in his Springlock suit, seems safe. He's one of them, and they are his beautiful family of his own making. They tie Afton up and leave him there, determined to find a way out, but the animatronics are still on their trail. The kids get cornered. It seems like it almost might be the end. Freddy, Chica, Bonnie, Foxy, they're closing in. They have them surrounded and are glaring at them with their glowing eyes. They say that windows are the eyes to the soul. It's 2:34. I'm about to almost start crying in this next footage, and I started off by saying windows are the eyes to the soul. Any window you look through, you'll see someone's soul. Eyes are the windows to the soul. So stupid. They say that windows are the eyes to the soul, and these little souls shine silver. That just makes me so sad. Like when you think about Not me about to cry about Freddy Fazbear's, but like when you think about little tiny children who were just having a nice day at a pizzeria and some creepy weirdo murdered them, stuffed them in an animatronic suit, and now they're trapped and confused and they're afraid of the people who might be able to save them and think that the man who killed them is a good guy, and they all that is showing of their own self is these little silver lights in the eyes of these animatronics. When I think too much about the visuals of it, it's like, okay, all right, it's a spooky place. But then like when you think too much about the reality of it and you're like, these children were murdered and stuffed inside animatronic suits. That's terrible and sad. There's little babies. Oh! And I know it's like, this is FNAF, blah, 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 we're purple murder man, purple guys. It's sad that these children are gone. And you know what? I'll make it real in my mind enough that it'll make me cry. And you should too. We should all be bummed out about this. A fifth animatronic appears, a yellow version of Freddy, older than the others, but something about this golden Freddy stills the air in the room. There is calm. It's a presence they all remember. It's Michael, their friend, who recognizes and knows them. This group of teenagers will not hurt the children in the animatronics. This group will not take away their happiest day. The other animatronics stop. They go still, realizing that the teenagers are not a threat. And just like that, the danger is past. A pounding sounds from the door, the sound of welding tools, as Carlton's father, Chief Burke, forces his way inside. Golden Freddy disappears, the animatronics stay where they are, and the kids run towards the open door and freedom. Everyone but Charlie, because Afton jumps out of the shadows, puts a knife to her neck, and tries to drag her back with him, threatening to keep her, saying she's like the family he built. She's like them. And then Charlie goes, "If you want to be one of them, then be one of them," she shouted, and she tripped the spring locks. Dave's eyes widened, and then he screamed. Charlie jerked her hands free, barely evading the locks as they snapped open and plunged into his neck. She took a step back, watching as Dave crumpled to the ground, still screaming as the costume released. Part by part, the animatronic insides pierced his flesh, as if it were not even there. At some point, he stopped screaming, but he still writhed on the floor. For what? And that is the end of the picture I took of the page. And that's it. The book resolves with goodbyes amongst the friends, promises to keep in contact, and a quiet moment at the cemetery in town, where Charlie visits her father's grave for the first time and remembers one of her happiest days with him. All I'm saying. And that is The Silver Eyes. I actually really liked this book. It had its issues here and there, such as the sudden point of view switches, but overall it was entertaining, engaging, it had good characters that were fun to follow. Charlie is especially great as a main character, and it really evoked that specific vibe you get from classic 80s, 90s slashers. Think the original Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream. Like, the feeling you get when you watch those and you see the final girl, like, fight to the end, it had that feeling, and it was just fun. We're moving on to the second book in the series, The Twisted Ones.